Welcome back to Book Talk. Today I'm going to be talking about a novella written by James Patterson and Scott Slaven called Taking the Titanic. To be completely honest, this is the first anything I've read by James Patterson, and I gotta say, it was wildly disappointing. Taking the Titanic is one of many novellas Patterson has co-written that he refers to as bookshots. They are described as being lightning-fast stories by James Patterson, novels you can devour in a few hours, impossible to stop reading, and all original content from James Patterson. That's one of the things that drew me to buy this in the first place. I love reading long books, but they can often take a lot of time to get through, and sometimes I need the accomplishment of finishing something. That being said, I didn't actually end up finishing this book. For the first time in my entire life, I did not finish a book. And I've read Wicked to completion. Everything on the covers was complete false advertising, from the synopsis on the back to the tagline on the front. You've got a heist to remember on the front, and on the back, posing as newlyweds, two ruthless thieves board the Titanic to rob its well-heeled passengers. But an even more shocking plan is afoot. A sensational scheme that could alter the fate of the world's most famous ship. First of all, a robbery is not the same thing as a heist. Heists are badass. They're meticulously planned down to the most minute detail and usually target valuable items like diamonds or large sums of money like in Ocean's 11. What these two did was pickpocketing. When I first read the title, I thought, oh my god, a heist on the Titanic? How intriguing. And then I started to read. For those who don't know, the Titanic began its maiden voyage on the 10th of April 1912, was struck by an iceberg late at night on the 14th, and finally sank in the wee hours of the 15th of April. So that's about 4 days. And there's too much nonsense shoved into those 4 days that is entirely unbelievable. I was shaking my head for pretty much the entire thing. I give Taking the Titanic 1 star. It had the potential to be really good, but between the poorly thought out storyline and constant chaos that was meant to keep us entertained, it fell flat in my opinion. I also felt like it was extremely disrespectful to the actual tragedy of the Titanic with how cheap and pandering it is. The novella starts on the 9th of April, the day before the Titanic set sail, in Southampton. We are introduced to the male thief in the couple whose name may or may not be Nigel Bowen. He's in a bar, playing a game of cards. So, it literally opens by ripping off Jack Dawson's introductory scene from the Titanic movie. I pretty much figured I wouldn't like it after that, but was willing to give it a chance. In this first chapter, he meets a supposed red-headed whore. Together they end up swindling all the men in the card game and walk away with the winnings. Then the woman asks Nigel if he'd like to try something bigger with her, which is the heist on the Titanic. I don't know any thieves personally, but I'm pretty sure two complete strangers wouldn't team up for a robbery, especially since the woman pulled a gun on Nigel when she thought he was going to keep all the money for himself. Not exactly the bedrock of a trustworthy relationship. The next day they're boarding the ship and the woman has taken the name Celia Bowen. While they're waiting to get on, they hear a newspaper boy calling out, "Southampton streetwalker strangled," and we're made to think that this woman, Celia, isn't the same woman from the day before. Spoiler alert, she is. She was just wearing a red wig at the time. The first day aboard the ship is pretty uneventful, especially when compared to the other 4 days when there's so much packed in. They have dinner, then the men play a game of cards. Nigel's plan is to establish himself as being extremely bad at cards and then suddenly have a winning streak. But that never ends up happening. Before the night ends, Celia loses her bracelet as a way to keep them from suspicion when they start stealing from everyone else in first class. Now I'm going to make a little timeline so you can see how ridiculous this book is. I should add that Celia and Nigel are both described as being very good looking. An older married man, Mr. Randolph Davies, and a young bachelor, Mr. Philip Colley, are attracted to Celia, and a young woman, Miss Emily Moore, is enamored with Nigel. Let's begin. Thursday, the 11th of April, 1912. 8 a.m. Everyone from dinner the night before is spending time together in the first-class promenade. Celia is approached by Mr. Davies, who is seemingly trying to comfort her after the loss of her bracelet. Then he makes sure his wife isn't looking before squeezing Celia's breast. This was pretty unbelievable to me. Not that he would squeeze her breast like that, but because he did it so publicly. Anyone could have seen him, and at least one person did. Celia slaps Mr. Davies across the face and walks away before being approached by Mr. Colley, who saw everything. The chapter ends with Miss Moore's father dropping his billfold. Nigel picks it up for him and hands it back with a flourish, and Celia sees him walking away, stuffing a wad of bills in his pocket. Just with the way this moment is described, it doesn't seem likely that he would have been able to slip some bills out of the billfold without anyone noticing. Because again, it was kind of too public to be doing something like that. 2:30 p.m. Celia and Nigel meet back in their room and talk about what they'd napped so far during the day. Then they go to sleep. I had to double check the time at the beginning of the chapter. I figured it was night since they were going to sleep, but apparently it was just an afternoon nap. It's kind of stupid to me, and I'm not really sure what the point was for this entire chapter. But at the end of it, Celia kicks Nigel out of the bed and says if he tries to share the bed with her again, he'll be confronted by her gun. So, great partnership. 3:30 p.m. Nigel is being followed. He wants to make sure he's right, so he asks Miss Moore, who's nearby, to take a walk with him. He leads her around until they get to the squash court, and he confirms that a bald man is following him. Nigel tells Miss Moore that the reason he did all that was to be alone with her, which she falls for. Then he kisses her and steals a beaded purse from the folds of her dress. 5:30 p.m. We get more crap of Celia and Nigel in their room talking about their arrangement. 7:30 p.m. At dinner that night, Nigel gets extremely drunk and he starts speaking rudely about Celia in front of everyone. She gets up to retire for the night and Mr. Davies jumps at the chance to escort her back to her room. He apologizes for the way he acted that morning. When they get to the room, he makes another pass at her, but in a more polite way this time. Instead of touching one of her breasts, he kisses her hand for a full 10 seconds, then tries to kiss her, but is interrupted by Nigel coming into the room with Celia's gun. 9:45 p.m. Mr. Davies makes a deal with Nigel that he will write a check for all the money he lost, plus more, to keep him and Celia comfortable for some time, as long as Nigel will behave himself and not gamble for the rest of the trip. He agrees. Davies hands over the check and leaves. Then it's revealed that Nigel wasn't drunk, and the two of them had planned the whole thing. Now all they had to do was sit back and relax until they could cash the check in America. Okay, that was one day. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I felt like that was way too much stuff. Too much things going on. I don't know. Bunch of crap. And I'm not doing it again for the next days, okay? It's just awful. Too much happened on the 12th. First of all, Nigel apparently has fallen in love with Celia after not even knowing her for 3 days. And it's not like she's been nice to him either. Then Celia is invited to an older woman's cabin who reveals that she knows Celia's true identity and wants to be paid for her silence. Nigel gets into 3 fistfights, which seriously makes 0 sense because they're in first class, not steerage. And Celia gets attacked by a Frenchman who turns out to be her old boyfriend who taught her how to pick pockets or something. She had left him shortly before she met Nigel. They had planned to kidnap a child on board the ship the Olympic, which is why she decided to go on the Titanic, I guess. But he had contingencies in place and also booked passage on the Titanic for his bodyguard. That doesn't really explain how he got there, since he was supposed to be on the Olympic and had no way of knowing what Celia would do after escaping him. So that's everything that happened on the 12th, which I thought was a ridiculous amount. 3 fistfights, blackmail, old boyfriends, I don't know. So stupid. The Frenchman and his bodyguard then kidnap a little boy that we were introduced to earlier in the story named Arthur, and Celia as well, because why not? That's pretty much when I stopped reading. I don't even care how it ends, although I did skim to find out who murdered the hooker, and it was the French guy. He framed Nigel for it, but that doesn't really make sense. There was no sign that he had been following Celia the whole time. And also, whenever anyone brought up the murder, Nigel got very fidgety. And I don't get why, if he wasn't guilty, right? Doesn't make sense either. All in all, a big pile of crap. Especially considering the fact that this could have been so much better if they made it an actual heist. Like if someone spent weeks or months even leading up to the Titanic's departure to plan the robbery of some rich woman's jewelry collection or what have you. But even then, I don't think the heist would happen right away, or else the thieves would have to risk hiding whatever they stole. It'd be more likely to happen the night before it was set to reach its final destination. It's an interesting idea with the sinking of the ship and all, but it really should have been set on a fictional ship that would later sink. I feel like it was definitely trying to capitalize on the fame of the Titanic. You'll have to let me know what you think. I did read some good reviews on Goodreads, but I found them hard to believe. And most of those people only started reading it because it was about the Titanic. So, I'll see you all next week for a special video that rose from the ashes of this dumpster fire. Here's a little hint. It has to do with James Patterson and his feud with Stephen King. See you there on Book Talk.